Welcome to yet another episode of the Vernon Budget Presentations. Thanks to the folks that came this evening. As we've done in the past, Matt will be giving a brief presentation. We've cut back on the format a little bit, having conversations with different people in the community. I would suggest that we do more of a bulleted format instead of getting into all of the weeds and minutiae of the business. So Matt will do that overview. And before he does that, there have been questions about the staff person that has resigned. It is Mary Kaufman, the 4th grade teacher, and that position will not be refilled. We also have 3 other changes coming at the school. The PE teacher, 1 para, and Kelly Harrison from the cafeteria will be moving down to Louisiana with her family. Her husband's been down there since the closure of BY. So we'll be losing 4 members of our family this year, but we'll be welcoming in 3 new members. So, all right. So Matt, whenever you're set to go. And as always, if you have questions, please feel free to ask all the questions you'd like. This is our opportunity to hear from you folks directly, and that's good for us. And does everyone have a copy of the new budget or the presentation? Did we make copies of the presentation?
I did not make copies of the
Okay.
presentation.
So if you'll place your attention on the overhead, and Matt will review what we're doing.
We're going to go over the reductions in our first budget for March of 2015. There were reductions from staffing, discretionary expenditures, operation and maintenance, and in our secondary tuitions. For staff reductions, we had a reduction of 1 regular and special ed educator for a savings of $37,481 plus their benefits. We now have a reduction from a classroom teacher as well for a savings of $51,285. And then we have some realized savings through attrition from the nurse retiring and a new nurse coming on. In our discretionary expense reductions, we have general program reductions of $101,450, which includes professional development money, instructional technology money, instructional supplies, substitute salaries, preschool reductions, plant operation and maintenance, and secondary tuitions. The staff at Vernon School. Vernon Elementary School employs 10.5 positions for paraprofessionals in the 2015-16 school year. They will be assigned as so. 1 paraprofessional with the kindergarten class. It's projected to be 22 to 23 students at this point. 1 paraprofessional shared by grades 1 and 2. A half of a paraprofessional's time providing literacy support to kindergarten and 1st grade. 1 paraprofessional shared between grades 3 and 4. 1 paraprofessional assigned to a 5th grade class that has 21 students in it. 1 planning room para. 2 2nd grade special education paras. 1 4th grade special education para, and 2 6th grade special education paras. And the rest of the staff. We'll have 1 kindergarten next year, 1 1st grade, 2 2nd grades, 2 3rd grades, 2 4th grades, 1 5th grade class, and 1 6th grade class. We also will have an 80% time art teacher, 80% PE teacher, and an 80% librarian who fills up the rest of her schedule with academic support, which is helping with literacy instruction. Also a full-time technology teacher who helps with academic support as well, and a full-time music teacher who does instrumental and vocal. And then we have 1 full-time enrichment / class reduction teacher, which is partially grant funded. There are 4 custodians. 1 is not full-time, 3 are full-time. 1 principal, an 80% guidance position, 1 nurse, and then 1 administrative assistant. Questions? Also, this budget now is $35,951 less than last year's budget. So almost 1% lower than the prior school year.
So what's the total savings from the first budget you presented this year?
From the very first.
So 99,506
Is that what it is?
from the first budget.
About $100,000.
And that first budget also had cuts to like the paraprofessional staffing before, from the previous year as well.
The fourth grade teacher leaving is that new cut, and it's a substantial cut. Any other questions? Anything you'd like to share with us?
Well,
Yes.
a couple of slides back, we did have like 101,000 right there. Reductions of 101,000.
That includes like what I was alluding to with Bruce, like that goes back to the original budget.
Right.
And then the 99,000 in cuts is from the original budget. So there was actually cuts from the prior year budget coming in.
And that's these?
Some of that is those. yeah.
Okay.
So some of those weren't cuts since the failed budget. They were cuts from the prior school year.
Oh, okay.
So as an example, like the secondary tuition, that 55,000 reduction was in the original budget, but we wanted to add them all up in terms of what were considered initially and then things that were added on.
Total is probably what, like 170,000-ish or so?
About 200,000.
About 200,
Yeah.
okay. When everything's all put
But again,
together.
some of that was already cut in the original budget, and so we just wanted to show.
From last year's budget?
The 13, 14.
No, well, it doesn't really show from last year's because you also have what goes up from last year. So like salaries and stuff go up because of the contract. But if you were to add up the stuff that was removed from the budget, it would be about $200,000, yes, from last year's budget. But then you end up with about $36,000 in actual lower budget by the time you factor in the things that went up. Because not everything went down, some things went up. So overall, we're down $36,000. But to do that, we removed about $200,000 worth of expenses from the budget. Does that help?
Yes.
We go back to the slide, that shows the para, I know all of us have moments where we're really only half there, but can you tell me what the 1.5 paraprofessional, is the para doing something else, somewhere else, or only working half a day, or how does the 0.5 equate to a 1.5?
It's not a 1.5, there's
One position at halftime.
1.5 paraprofessional, so there's one half-time.
One person at
Paraprofessional.
halftime. It's not one point, it's not a person and a half. It's one person at halftime.
Oh, okay.
And yes, it is daily, it's a half day, it's a morning position.
Yes.
So then in addition to these pairs, you have the other teachers that fill in, like the librarian.
Correct, that's the next slide.
Those are all additional, are they in that number?
No, they're not in that number.
So if you go to the next slide.
And
An
one of,
example, where the librarian, 0.2 per ton is used for academic support. And with
Technology.
technology.
and as we said at the previous forum, or at previous meetings, with the fourth grade teacher leaving and not replacing her, some of these folks will be doing other duties to pick up some of the things that she did. So this is what's being done presently, but Dana will be reorganizing what the staff does to make sure that all of the duties that have been covered by that fourth grade teacher don't fall on the wayside and protect our programs. So some folks will be changing some of the roles.
Well, this is what it should look like for next year. This is the reorganization.
Okay.
plan
And we
is
have
here
the capital
too.
plan. People like to discuss the capital plan? Do we have that on a slide, or is that
I
just a
got it.
handout?
I swear to God, look at that. Awfully small.
Okay.
It's a little better.
You guys think you want, right?
Thank you.
You want the other one? No, just the.
It's present in the
Yeah, sure.
first columns, A through J. The notes are not really useful for this,
So what, I'm sorry, what do you want me to
so
do?
you can expand it so that you lose J, you lose A through J, K, you lose K and notes.
Oh.
So you're good at notes. Yeah, that's good. Because it's more the current year.
Okay.
So as we talked about earlier, we wanted the $90,000 this year because this is the last year that we do have our reduced tax rate from the state. So it makes sense to put that chunk in, knowing that the budgets are going to be tight going forward. And, you know, as you can see, there's a lot of things over the course of life cycles that get replaced in a school. So, but we do feel we have an adequately funded plan, and we'll be working on that between now and next budget session as well.
So the FY16, that, column, go ahead. Can we slide through that and see what we have coming up? Okay, so
Big roofing.
classroom tile,
Oh, yeah.
roofing. Those are the-
Those are the big ones.
Mike?
Yes.
I noticed when I was looking at the capital plan from the town side, that we have a school generator on our capital plan. Do you guys know what that is? I was trying to figure that out.
The generator that's out here, we switched out generators. We had an old generator that was not functioning up to standards, and we needed a larger capacity generator. And a couple of years ago, we did that, and the town, it went through the town because this is the emergency center for the town, so we were able to fund through the town's capital plan that piece of equipment.
And we also got grants.
There was grant money for that also.
So that's different than what's on your capital plan when it says generator?
Yes.
So those are two different things?
Wait a minute, let me double check.
And I think the one that's on here is the replacement of
Right.
that generator.
Yeah.
2032.
Yep.
Yep.
2032.
It's the same generator.
That's, it's
Yeah.
the same generator, but going out into the future, we
And that
have to book it as ours because it is on our property, but we may be able to do the same thing, but
Are you aware that we've been funding it on the town side?
no.
I think we were, because I think we came up with it was cheaper, just like the regular school budget. It's cheaper to fund it on the town side versus the school side. I think so.
Oh, we'll have to look into that one.
Yeah, I'll have to show it to you because we have money
Okay.
in for it on this town's capital plan. So maybe we decide to share it or something, I don't know, I just didn't know if we knew about it.
I'll have to look back and see if we did that.
Yeah. The generator was something that was discussed at town meeting. I think it actually took us like 3 or 4 years to get that one through. So
Yeah.
it has been discussed at length.
Yeah, 'cause there's
Not
probably-
incrementally.
Yeah, we did,
Money that was
we did the
attached.
pad first, there were several stages to getting it done. But certainly, we'll look at the financing and see what the arrangement is with that.
In the budget, It's two people two staff who are leaving and there'll be attrition, right?
A paraprofessional and
But
a teacher.
I heard there was a second teacher.
We have 4 people leaving, but 3 of them will be replaced. We
Yeah,
have a
that's-
cafeteria person, PE person. Yeah, well, I can't say, we don't employ the cafeteria person directly, so.
Yeah.
But the cafeteria person is leaving, and then we have Chloe Christensen, the para, and Kelly DeRocha, the PE teacher. But the
She's
PE
being
teacher,
replaced.
Has to be replaced.
right, they'll be replaced.
So the kitchen help and the gym teacher are being replaced, PE teacher, and the paraprofessional and the classroom teacher are not being replaced.
I am confused about, does the 62,000, let's say for the person not being replaced, the teacher, does that include benefits as well as salary? Or the 37, anything, 37,506, is that benefits in addition, including, salary including all the costs attached to that position?
So the paraprofessional position, the 37,481, includes the benefits. So it's so that first figure.
Oops, sorry. This says 506, but it's $20.
On this slide here.
On this slide, it's the most
Yeah.
accurate. So that includes the para's position and the benefits. The classroom teacher, we know we're going to save more than 51,285. We just didn't factor in the benefits. And that might be where the $60,000.
Yeah, because the grid, this number, it's very confusing. It can be confusing, unless you're Frank, who knows everything.
I just want to speak to Nancy's question about the school generator. The only piece of it Nancy's still in was the status for last year, that there was money left over that we used to offset, but it's not in any projection to raise any more money for it.
So it was just a one-time thing?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do I belabor the generator question just a little bit longer? What does a generator actually develop? Is it power for emergency egress or power for the whole school? I mean, what does it function?
We increase the capacity, so if the building were needed in some sort of disaster, flood, whatever, natural disaster, whatever, this is the evacuation center, and we needed to upgrade so that we could provide lighting for the facility and fire up our heating and things like that.
It does most of the facility, doesn't it, Dan?
Yeah.
And the old one we had could not, if we turned everything on, it wouldn't go on at the same time. This one here, we upgraded so that when we need the power, we will actually have the power.
So if people had to come here in the wintertime, it would have light and heat. And the previous generator did not have that capacity to do that. So we needed to upgrade so that we could be an official emergency center.
So just for clarification, that essentially because this is an emergency facility, power and lights, heat for the whole facility is essentially what that generator will supply.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Because we're sort of a standalone facility, then you've also got your well, you know, and your septic system and all that other stuff that's going to require, you know, your pumps, so.
And that's,
okay.
all of that rolled into the upgrade.
That's a fairly
I forget, I think the capacity of this generator is twice what we had before.
Yeah, okay.
Before, we just had like every other light on in the building or something, not a lot of power.
Okay.
So on page 2 of the capital plan, the line total capital expenditures, you have them going forward, that's what you anticipate in spending those years?
Correct.
But
At
you're
this
only
point, I mean-
raising, so for 16, you're anticipating spending 98.6, but you're only raising 90. And the 90 that you're raising is just, like, is there specific targets of assets that's going to, or?
Well, actually, a lot of it is because for 2 years, we have not put into the capital plan, and we have had expenditures. So it's really to keep the capital plan kind of at a level that it was. And again, like Matt said, we would like to do the $90,000 this year because down the road, it's going to become more and more difficult to try and raise money. And we do have a substantial building with substantial needs. Got to be able to maintain it.
So that final balance, the 353, 341 is kind of where you want to target at? 353, 327, 357?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about in the 350 range, and we didn't have an exact dollar amount, but that was the range we were shooting for with fluctuation. A lot of money.
Anyone else? Marion?
Can you explain, you know how we get a reduced rate on our taxes?
Yes.
And that's going away. That reduced rate, does that only go to the school, or does that go to the school and the town?
It's only this. Just briefly, when Act 60 came into place, the grand list was, the plant came off the educational grand list for the town. It did not come off the town grand list. It stayed on the municipal town grand list. Came off the municipal town school district grand list. So what happened at that point in time was we were at a 50% rate of the statewide property tax, because for years we had been giving tens of millions of dollars to the state through various taxes from Entergy, and the legislature agreed that we would get that rate. Then when the up rate came at the plant, there was a renegotiation and went to 75%. And then when the announcement of the plant closure came, when they ceased generation, they also ceased the generation tax. And at that point in the legislation, we were supposed to go to 100% assessment. And being in Montpelier, I went and said, you know, this isn't possible. We can't have a cliff like that. And we negotiated a 5-year ramp off where we'd stay at 75, 75. It's 87, 92, and then 100%. So we've got a ramp off. The first thing I pitched was to keep it forever, but they kind of didn't want to do that. So, but yeah, but we will be equal to all other towns in the state of Vermont. We will be paying 100% of the statewide property tax. The advantage we have still is that Entergy is on the grand list for the town. And as you know, it's easier for the town to raise, with a penny, they raise substantially more money than we do. So anything that we can share with the town, or a service that can be provided by the town, actually saves the taxpayers money. So when you see revenue from the rec department coming to the school, that actually saves the taxpayers money. And we've done a large number of those items, and there's still some that we want to discuss with the select board as to some other joint activities that we could share where the burden goes more to the town side. But they have to be, they cannot be direct educational services, or like our buses. We could not have the town pay for the buses, because those are deemed direct educational services. So, you know, they can't pay for a 4th grade teacher, but they could rent space from us. So we'll continue to work cooperatively with the select board to get every advantage we can out of that.
Mike, will this revenue coming in from the rec department always be a benefit, you know, to the school versus coming out of the town side? Will it always be there? I know that we've got this abatement, or whatever you want to call it, reduction, but this revenue coming from, I'll just sort of repeat the question, coming from the rec department, will it always be a less extreme, a more user-friendly way of generating revenue for the school coming from that side rather than the town side? Will it always be that way?
Well, I don't know about always, because you don't know what what the property across the street is going to be worth once it's all decommissioned. But until the time that it's decommissioned, it still maintains a significant value. So until it's removed, and that's part of the question that the town needs to ask is, what is the value of a non-generating nuclear plant? Well, there are still a lot of assets sitting there, so it's a substantial amount of money on the grand list for the town. What will happen is, at the point in time, which at this point is probably 60 years down the road, as that goes down and down and down, it'll reach a point where it may be equal either way. But the other thing that has substantial value that we can get revenue off of, and there's no time in the foreseeable future it's going away, is the dry cask storage. And that does have significant value. So there will always be, until the plant is totally decommissioned and the dry cask storage materials are removed, that will still generate a significant amount of money for the town, because it is a very valuable piece of property.
Well, just as an aside, I believe there's a request, for another, slab for dry cask storage. So it looks like there's going to be something that we're going to have to store probably for our lifetime.
There's going to be, in total, it'll be 53 dry cask storage units at the facility. They're going to be doing the ISFC, is the pad that it goes on. That's going through the Public Service Board now for the permitting. And once that's permitted, that's what they'll offload the fuel into. So there'll be, I think there's 13 now, and it'll be a total of 53. And each one of those has significant value. And you're right, until there is a national repository for nuclear waste, it will be sitting there. And that's why it's also important. I serve on the decommissioning panel. It's also important when we get it right with the type of casks that are used and things like that. So. Yes.
With the preschool moving over to the school, and their teachers are they teachers, or are they, because if they're teachers or educators, then they have to be certificated in a different way, do they not? And then they would become educators and therefore part of the school? No.
It's a separate program. It needs to meet certain requirements. What, 5 stars? Is it 5 star, 4 star? 5 star. Yeah. And the program gets certified, but they still need the supervision of a certified teacher.
Which they currently have.
Which they have.
No, they contract with someone who comes in so many hours a week.
It's a licensed teacher.
Part of their budget. It's not part of our budget.
Not part of our budget?
Well,
part of the rec department
Rec,
budget?
yeah.
Yeah, it's not part of the.
That's what I meant.
It's not part of the school district budget.
Wow, how do you manage that?
They're a separate entity.
Yeah, we have several preschool partnerships, and some of them are in the schools, and this is another example of a private town-run preschool that will be in the building, but it's their staff. So it's a nice...
Can you get away with that from the federal?
Yeah, they meet all the requirements.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think we've talked about how it'll be much more beneficial having kids here earlier in the building.
Yeah, well, I'm not against it,
Yeah.
I'm just interested in it. From like No Child Left Behind, The Race to the Top, and all, core whatever it is.
Well, they are required to have a certified teacher
Okay, that's what I was.
as a director. And that is how they operate presently, but that's not part of our budget.
Right.
Actually, when we initially started, we had a staff member that did that role while the thing got off the ground, and then now they have their own person.
Not a question, just a comment, and just a thank you for everybody who had their fingers in the pie to kind of bring the minutia that these figures represent out here to clarity, to light, because I know there's a lot of heavy lifting that goes on, to figure out, put these numbers out here so people can clearly understand. I think it goes a long way, Mike, and to all of you out here to really help the transparency to get these numbers out to the people, and I think it's appreciated from my side, and I think for a lot of people that don't really understand the hours that goes into getting, you know, these numbers that represent on this piece of paper right here. So thank you very much for all of you.
Well, thank you for saying that, because it is a good deal of work. But we are all in the same boat together. And we are town members as well as school board members, so we all share the same concerns. But it is nice to have these kind of conversations, and this board has always been more than willing to be as transparent as possible, whenever possible. I mean, there are certain things contractually you can't talk about, or confidentiality issues, but whenever there's something that we can answer directly and be as transparent as possible, that's what we strive to do. And that's why we always encourage people, please come to our meetings, ask questions. We like the dialogue.
Do you want, I have 142 people who are subscribers to the newsletter. Do you want me to send out another notification? I don't have to wait till the end of the month. You want me to send out, hey, reminder, folks, come to, you have questions, you want more information? Do you want me to send that out like next week before your next meeting?
Sure. I mean, that's something, and I've said it. And I've said it many, many times. That's something as a board, or especially myself, I don't want to speak for the entire board, but I think we all feel the same. We miss that opportunity at town meeting to have that dialogue. And so, yeah, the more people that come, the better we like it. It actually makes us think sometimes about things we hadn't thought of, like the generator. That's a new piece of information. We look at that, Sally clarified it. But you can't catch everything, and it's nice when people come in and say, hey, did you think about this? So, yes, ma'am.
One more, and this might be for Dr. Staley. I went to a tax seminar, Vermont Symposium, and they said that with the new education law for districts who merge, they're talking about all the, the schools merging, who merged between July 1, 2017 and July 1, 2019, they'll see a homestead rate reduction of 8 cents, 6 cents, 4 cents, and 2 cents the first 4 years. Are we eligible for that?
We are, but we would have to have a lot of discussion at each district board level to create a supervisory district, which would be one board, a pre-K-12 board that would supervise the schools. We're a very well-coordinated district as it is. And so we've just started those discussions with school boards about what would it look like. Frank is going to get some models, financial models together to show the first year it actually would be 10 cents reduction on the tax rate, and then 8, 6, 4, and 2 progressively down. But we want to see what the models would look like. And we've talked about the fact that at schools like Vernon and Guilford and Putney and Dummerston, they're large enough schools that we don't have to have any threat of closing those schools. We have 160, 170 kids in those schools. So I think other districts, other supervisory unions, like Wyndham Central, where we both worked at one time, schools with 30 kids, 40 kids, they're apt to close under a scenario like that. We don't feel it would affect us. But we also feel like we might be able to set up school councils where we would have board representatives from each district serve with the principal, community members, parents, on a standing board, 5 to 7 member board that would meet monthly and advocate for their own school. So you'd have like the supervisory union, you'd have like the union high school board that operates BUHS 6 in the middle school and the career center. You'd have that one board, and then you'd have school councils that would be more advocates for the local town schools.
So
But,
we're not forced to have just one board for W.
The way you get the incentive is you have to have a supervisory district with one board. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, there may be ways to make sure that we have the, advocacy that I think we would have by each town.
I have a question for Dana.
Yeah.
At a school board meeting, I don't know if it's the last one or the one before, we made a suggestion that you look into combining first and second and third and fourth. Any plans for doing that at some point to reduce the number of educators in the classroom, but also Some places in the country, I think, have done that. Have you thought any more about doing that? Down the road, like a year or 2, 3?
As things currently stand, when you look at the Common Core standards, when you look at all of the curriculum work that we're doing within the district, and all of the professional development that our teachers receive to provide instruction at their specific grade levels, it would really require us to depart from what the whole supervisory union was doing, which would then remove us from all of those professional development opportunities. I don't see where that would be a benefit to us, and I'm also not sure that the data supports those mixed-aged classrooms necessarily as being the most successful model. So there aren't any current plans to combine classrooms in that way.
And also the thing to bear in mind is what we just discussed with Mr. Staley, is that things are going to be changing dramatically in how these schools are run and who's going to be overseeing the programs within the schools. So as time goes on, you'll probably be less directly involved with your own school. You will not have your own school board. You'll have a regional board or a district board. And as Mr. Staley said, it'll be K-12 or pre-K-12. So, you'll get a representative from Vernon who will, it's like Mike Collier goes to the high school board. So, but all those things have to come through various agreements within the supervisory union. We have some concerns here in Vernon in particular because we have a lot of unique situations within the town, and within legislation we have some unique situations that we'll need to discuss with the other districts to ensure that Vernon keeps the opportunities for school choice and things like that. So there's a lot of discussion to take place, but over the next 2 to 3 years, the way education is delivered is going to be dramatic. Well, not delivered, but the way it's managed is going to be changed tremendously, and people are all wondering how much it's going to change. And there's already discussions about concerns that are there that will be rediscussed in January or so. It's a pretty much a moving target at this point.
So someplace like Brattleboro has larger school population at the elementary level. Will they have more representation on this board? That's not fair.
Well, it's the way it works. It's a one-man, one-vote situation. So what you have is, take my position as a state rep. I represent 4,300 people. Every state rep represents as close to 4,300 as you get. It's never perfect, but I'm 10 off the perfect number between Guilford and Vernon. That would be the same situation. So we could say, if you have, for every 10,000 people you're entitled to one representative. And you can shift that number, and that would dictate how many people you could have on the board. And when we reduce the board size, what do we have, 17?
17 to 9.
17 to 9, that's one of the things that we did was say, okay, for every 30,000 people you get a representative, or whatever that number was. And that's how your population gets equal representation. Or if you wanted every town, Brattleboro, I don't know if the high school would have their own, I don't know how it would work. Like Brattleboro would have representation, Guilford, Vernon, Dummerston, and Putney. You could say, well, for every 100,000 people you have one rep, so every town would have one. I'm not sure if it would work that way, but you've got to go through all the...
I don't know if that's been determined yet. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this. I'd like to see every town have 2 reps. And maybe Brattleboro has 3 because of their population. But you need an odd number, that gives you 11. It's a manageable number. When we had 17 at BUHS, you couldn't have a quorum because people wouldn't show up. Went down to 9, it's much more effective. But, I'd want more than one person representing each school district.
And for the number of years I've served on the high school board, as well as the elementary board, one of the concerns that you would hear would be, well, Brattleboro's got enough that they can outvote everybody. And interestingly enough, Brattleboro tends not to agree with one another a whole lot, so that never took place. There was never like Brattleboro's driving the bus. I mean, you know, different sections of Brattleboro are represented differently. So it works at the high school.
I think that the Union High School is a great example where the outlying towns have one board rep and Brattleboro has 5. But there's never a case where Brattleboro is browbeating anybody to do anything. It's really a consensus board, and it's been a great board. Well representing the outlying towns. I wouldn't like to see that sort of ratio for a supervisory district. I'd rather have what I said, the 2 plus 3.
But there will be a lot of changes. And I would encourage folks to come and ask questions, because it will change governance and it's going to change our local patrol. Act 60 impacted local patrol tremendously, and this is just another step in that process. So, as long as the board is here, the more input we get from town members when we're negotiating all these things, the better off hopefully we'll be as a town when it all comes to fruition. If you have thoughts or concerns, please voice them. Anything else on the budget? If not, thank you very much for coming. And we'll see you the 22nd. If you got yours.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay.